Hi, I'm Ken Armstrong. I'm the president and CEO of North Arrow Minerals, and thanks for taking the time to listen to this quick update on North Arrow and our activities through 2023. And in particular, we're going to focus on the lithium projects that we picked up through the year and sort of the status of the projects and what our plans are going forward. So, of course, with plans going forward, I'm going to be making some forward-looking statements. So please keep that in mind as we go through the presentation. We are an exploration company listed on the TSX Venture Exchange under the ticker NAR, and we have a lot of experience with the exploration and evaluation of mineral projects in Northern Canada, in particular the Northwest Territories and Nunavut, and that's reflected in our project pipeline. We have a number of projects in the NWT and Nunavut, obviously the lithium projects that I'm going to talk about in some detail, but also we have a portfolio or a stable, I guess now you might call it, of gold and diamond projects that we've been looking at over the last 10 years or so. Those projects do have value, we believe. We can hold on to them at low or no cost going forward while we focus on the lithium exploration ideas that we've developed over the last 12 months. And that's what I'm going to really try and take you through in this presentation. We now have 4 lithium projects in the company. That includes 3 properties in the Northwest Territories that are all drill ready. They all host spodumene pegmatite drill targets. Spodumene, of course, is the mineral that we're interested in looking for when we're looking for hard rock lithium deposits. We also have a number of more greenfields ideas and projects like our Bathurst project in Nunavut, where we think we have the opportunity to discover brand new, previously unidentified spodumene pegmatite provinces. But our focus has really been on the NWT projects. The entire portfolio of lithium properties we acquired for less than $60,000 this year. And again, one of the key things I think I'd like for you to take away from this is North Arrow is a bit of a rare company in that we have not just 1, but 3 drill-ready spodumene pegmatite projects that are fully permitted, and our goal in 2024 is going to be to see these properties drilled. They're all, in terms of the drill-ready lithium projects, they're all located in the Northwest Territories. The geology and the geological setting for these deposits is very similar. Our DeStaffany project is in the Yellowknife pegmatite province, just about 100 kilometers to the east of Yellowknife. And then we have our LDG and MacKay lithium projects that are in the MacKay-Elmer domain, which is the exact same geological setting as we see around Yellowknife, and we think represent a really significant opportunity for the company. First, I'll just really quickly touch on DeStaffany. It was the first lithium project that we acquired in January of this year. It is, as I mentioned, in the Yellowknife pegmatite province. It's an area that's being explored quite aggressively by a number of other players, including Lift Power, as well as Midas Minerals and Loyal Lithium. Midas and Loyal are examples of some Australian companies that are in the region evaluating it for its lithium potential. We saw that sort of work and that interest happening around this time last year, companies coming into the area to look at the lithium potential. And because of our background and our knowledge, we knew of some opportunities, and DeStaffany was one of them. We staked it and announced its acquisition in January. It's an area that our group was familiar with. We'd explored that area around DeStaffany for tantalum about 30 years ago. And worth noting that DeStaffany is just about 18 or 20 kilometers to the northeast of Vital Metals' Nachalacho rare earth mine. And the Nachalacho deposit was actually found by our chairman, North Arrow's chairman, Gren Thomas, in his first public company in the 1970s. So it is an area where we have a lot of experience. Is partly then why we were aware that DeStaffany was available and something that we could acquire. It was mined in the 1940s and 50s for tantalum in the post-war years. 2 pegmatites were known on the property, Moose 1 and Moose 2. But these deposits were, despite the fact that lithium mineralization was noted, they were never evaluated for their lithium content. So we did get on the property this summer. We, like to think, rediscovered the Moose 3 and Moose 4 pegmatites that have lithium mineralization associated with them. And we also focused on some initial evaluation of the Moose 1. and the Moose 2 pegmatites for their lithium contents. Moose 1 was known in the 40s and 50s. It wasn't mined. It wasn't really looked at because it did not have significant tantalum mineralization. But channel sampling that we completed this year have returned consistent lithium grades over the entire strike length of the pegmatite. It's about 400, 350 or 400 meters long at surface. Good grades over 1% lithia or Li2O, which is important for these deposits. And certainly Moose 1 represents a target that needs to get drilled because it never has been drilled, similar to Moose 2, where we also completed some channel sampling and getting similar sort of grades and widths that we were seeing there, which wasn't really surprising because the other thing at Moose 2, this is the deposit that was mined in the 40s and the 50s, and there's a little pit on it. And if you look at the north wall of that pit, you can see the contact of the pegmatite with the country rock. And then below that in the pegmatite, you can see very large spodumene crystals, up to 1 meter in size, 1 meter plus in size. So very coarse grain. Clearly, you can see the lithium and the spodumene mineralization so that we know that it's there. And this is what we need to evaluate. We need to drill these pegmatites just to try and confirm what's happening at depth, what's the size potential, and can these pegmatites produce a marketable spodumene concentrate that could be shipped south and sold to the North American market. So in 2023, we did that bit of channel sampling and prospecting. We did collect some mineral characterization samples from Moose 2 as well, and that work is just wrapping up right now. Fair to say that the spodumene is of high quality, has a low iron content, looks like it's amenable to optical sorting technologies as well. All of this sort of building and confirming then that we do need to get here and drill these pegmatites and try and define a resource quite quickly. When we first acquired the projects and were evaluating them in the spring, we were talking about drilling them. We did get the permitting in place, so they are fully permitted to drill in 2024. But we also changed direction a little bit and indicated that instead we wanted to drill the LDG and the MacKay projects that we picked up in the Lac de Gras region, or the MacKay-Elmer domain north of Yellowknife. And the reason for that, I'll try and get across to you, is because we think there's real size potential for the pegmatites that we've identified on these properties. They are, as I mentioned, in the exact same geological setting as the spodumene pegmatites that we see around Yellowknife. We acquired them after going through a process that we talked about in January when we first announced acquiring DeStaffany. We said we were going to take a look at our existing project database and exploration information that we have from years and years of exploration in the Northwest Territories and Nunavut. And we did go through that exercise. And sometimes going through a database, you think it could be sitting at a computer and going through reams of numbers. In this case, really, it was as simple as we were going through our files and we pulled out an old map. It was cobbled together. And this is actually a photo of that map. It's 4 different maps of 1940s and 1950s era mapping by the Geological Survey of Canada that we sort of cut and pasted together way back when we were doing diamond exploration and looking at the area south of Lac de Gras. But taking a look at this map with sort of fresh eyes, we realized that it has marked on it a number of spodumene pegmatite localities over by Elmer Lake. But then what was really important for us were 3 localities in the MacKay Lake area and then in the area between MacKay Lake and Lac de Gras, where the descriptive notes talked about spodumene pegmatites being present, or the lithium silicate mineral spodumene being there. These locations, the 2 northern locations, actually sit on our LDG project, which was a diamond property at the time. And then the 3rd locality just south of MacKay Lake was one that we looked at. It was on open ground. We staked it, and that became our MacKay lithium project. So LDG had these 2 showings on it on the Geological Survey of Canada mapping. They're in the northeastern part of the LDG property, importantly, really close to the alignment of the Winter Road that connects Yellowknife with the Diavik and the Acadie diamond mines every winter. By being along the alignment, they're within about 5 kilometers of the current alignment, and there's actually an old alignment of that road that the showings come within about 1 kilometer or so with. You can see them clearly when you're standing on the outcrops. We made our way up there in the middle of the summer, confirmed that the spodumene pegmatite is present, and knew that we were onto something. And so with the work that we completed in July, we returned again in September to do some more work where we've identified in the neighborhood of 10 or 11 pegmatites on the property. Our real focus is kind of in the central region, where on this map you can see the gray areas are the sedimentary rocks, and they're right next to the pink, which are granites that are we call fertile, or 2 mica granites that could be an important source rock for lithium pegmatites that have intruded into these sediments. And that's where we're seeing quite a cluster of the pegmatites. And 2 of them, SD2 and SD4, have seen the most work and are of most interest because we're clearly seeing spodumene mineralization associated with them. This map shows sort of a cartoon in pink of where some of these pegmatites are, and then the yellow diamonds are sample locations. So just zooming in on the SD2 area, we're seeing some large outcrops at the southern extent of the main SD2 exposure, so up to 20 meters wide, really very clear, obvious outcroppings with coarse spodumene crystals. And you can see as well some of the channel sample results that we returned from the work that we did in July, over 1%. Li2O over 3 meters, which is important, but also in places seeing really coarse spodumene mineralization, like near the southernmost channel, which returned as 0.5% Li2O over 3 meters. But right next to that, there's really coarse spodumene crystals. And I think that just tells us that with the coarse mineralization, there could be sort of nugget effects, there could be zonations, things that we're going to need to be very careful of and aware of as we're doing more sampling and ultimately drill testing of this showing. We were back, as I mentioned, in September. We confirmed significant spodumene or lithium results from the spodumene pegmatites at the north end of the SD2, with results up over 1% Li2O. These are all the samples that we collected, by the way, that we're seeing on this map. And also importantly, seeing a sort of subparallel spodumene pegmatite just over 100 meters to the west of the main pegmatite. We see a sample that's over 5% Li2O. I think the important thing with that is that it is a series of subcrop and boulders that we collected over about a 200-meter strike extent. And what that tells us is there's a real potential here for multiple pegmatites in the region, and again, which is very reminiscent to what we're seeing and what is being seen with some of the work that's being done on the spodumene pegmatites down in the Yellowknife area. And part of the reason why maybe we're not seeing quite so much, I think we can show is just the amount of overburden in the region. And this is a little drone video that shows the SD2 pegmatite, the main pegmatite. You can see geologists standing on it, and we can quite a sort of circle on where we think the in a little cartoony fashion with ovals here, where we think the pegmatites extend to under overburden. If you look in the foreground, you can really see sort of the willows. This is in the fall, so all the leaves have fallen off those willows, and then the lichen-colored overburden. There's just not a lot of outcrop. There's plenty of opportunity and plenty of room for these pegmatites to carry on beneath overburden and along strike. The other thing you can see from this view up on the top, and it's circled, is the location of the SD4 spodumene pegmatites target that we've also identified. It's about 3 kilometers away to the northwest of SD2, and it's a very similar situation in many ways, with even less. Not in many ways, it is certainly with less outcrop, but the outcrops that we do see around SD4 have significant spodumene mineralization. This outcrop in this photo is an outcrop that's right along the lakeshore at the north end, the northernmost extent that we've traced it so far. There's also another area with quite a wide pegmatite. This photo shows in the foreground here that outcrop that you see in the foreground in the lower right is entirely pegmatite right across its width, just to give you an idea of scale. Again, very coarse grain spodumene mineralization, and then we see it down in the southeastern extent of SD4 as well. 7 samples total have been collected from these outcrops. 5 of them returned over 1% Li2O, which is important. But again, as I touched on, a lot of overburden. We can see the outcrop in the lower right here is the same as in the photo that's in the upper right. And I think that photo in particular is instructive, gives an idea just how low profile these outcrops are. You can see the 2 geologists standing some distance apart. That could be the true width of the pegmatite, but we really are not sure yet, and we need to drill this just to confirm that whether that's the case or not. And part of the reason we're not sure is because of the amount of overburden. You really get a handle on that by just looking at the foreground of that upper right photo. Again, you can see the willows, lichen and moss on the ground, and just no outcrop. So plenty of opportunity again to extend these pegmatites along strike beneath that overburden cover. All indications that we can see from looking at LiDAR information that we have, looking at geophysical data that we have, is that these pegmatites could very well extend for significant distances beneath overburden, including the distances between SD2 and the SD4 area. The terrain is very typical, very similar to what we just saw up around SD4. So a lot of overburden cover and a lot of opportunity then to make more discoveries or extend the current discoveries that we've already made at SD2 and at SD4. The other property then that we have, as I mentioned, is MacKay. It's about 20 odd kilometers to the south of those SD pegmatites. We have our MK1 and our MK3 pegmatite discoveries. MK1 was discovered in the location that was marked on those old GSC geological maps, and that was confirmed in July. And then this fall, when we were up following up on the property, we made the discovery at MK3. And I'll just quickly take you through those as well and show you why we think they're legitimate drill targets. MK1, a little different than what we saw up at LDG at the SD pegmatites. The MK1 pegmatites contain significant spodumene mineralization, but instead of a lot of overburden, there's actually a fair bit of outcrop. And these are sort of a 0.5 meter to 10 meter wide pegmatite dikes that are kind of interleaved into the host sedimentary country rocks. And it's a topographic high, which is again different. And this photo along the bottom of the slide, you can actually see it's a photo looking west towards the main showing. You can see the little rise that it's on, and we wonder if that sort of resistive nature that created that topographic high might be related to the fact that the pegmatites are fairly extensive and perhaps coalesce into something larger at depth, something that we can't tell at all until we do drill them. But what we see at surface is shown on this ortho photo. It shows some of the assay results from our 2 brief campaigns on the property this summer. Again, consistent high grade results, including some that were cut with a rock saw, a channel sample, so 1.8% over 4 meters. These are significant results. We need to drill test these and as I mentioned, just see if they do they connect beneath the surface, and what kind of tonnage potential might we see here. This is just a photo of the outcrop at the eastern extent, showing an example of some of the mineralization that we did see. Other difference, of course, is we're seeing is in the spodumene mineralization is very coarse grained, but it's sort of 2, 3, or 4 centimeter long spodumene crystals instead of tens of centimeters like we're seeing on the SD pegmatites up at LDG. The MK3 discovery, as I mentioned, we made it in the fall of this year while we were prospecting across some of the prospective areas of the property. It was a series of white pegmatite exposures that we could trace over about 130 meter strike extent. It clearly has potential to extend to the west along strike beneath overburden. It was a good day when we made that discovery, and here's a video Nick wanted me to show you here. September 22nd. Welcome to MK3. Spodumene pegmatite found on traverse by Luke. There's Luke up there on the middle knob. You can see our packs kind of on I think the first or second knob, and heading kind of northwestly or northwest anyway. It's very low profile outcrop, and then there's another knob right here that I haven't even been to yet. It's fantastic. So that's how it felt on the day, or how it looked on the day, and we now have assays from the samples that we did collect when we made the discovery, and again, really consistent high grade lithium numbers over the entire strike extent of the pegmatite, including some channel samples that we collected right at the very end of the program this fall. And I think those are probably the more important numbers to take a look at, because of course channel samples are truly representative of what was cut. So 4 meters means that those will be 4 1 meter continuous samples that were collected along a single cut, and really give us a good idea of what the representative mineralization might look like. So within MacKay and at LDG, clearly we're keen on them. And as I mentioned, in the middle of the summer, we decided to change direction and we wanted to drill them. Unfortunately, that didn't happen because of the wildfire situation in the NWT and the evacuation of Yellowknife in the middle of August. But we were able to get back up in the fall, which allowed us to make the discovery at MK3 and to learn more and really confirm for ourselves that each of SD2 and SD4 at LDG and MK1 and MK3 at MacKay are drill targets. And really, if just to summarize the reasons why we like them so much is with really what's pretty limited work this year, we've been able to show that there's consistent mineralization in these pegmatites, and in places they're over 20 meters wide, up to at least 500 meters long in the case of the SD pegmatites in particular at LDG. And the terrain is really flat. There's a lot of overburden cover, and lots of potential then to hide extensions of these pegmatites and additional pegmatites. And it's the kind of thing we just can't answer until we get a drill on the property and drill test them. But the geological setting is, as I've said a few times now, identical to the Yellowknife pegmatite province in terms of the pegmatites are intruding into these sedimentary rocks that are adjacent to these fertile two mica granites, and that gives us real I think confidence then in the model that we're looking at, that there could be Yellowknife type deposits at MacKay and at LDG. And then just as importantly, both of the projects are right adjacent to the winter road that connects Yellowknife with the diamond mines at Lac de Gras, Diavik and Ekati. And that being near that infrastructure is really important. And it is infrastructure. It's seasonal infrastructure, but that winter road is built every year. And in the case of LDG and those outcrops, you can actually see the mine infrastructure at Diavik on the horizon. It's only about 10 kilometers away. You can stand on the outcrops. You can see Diavik's wind farm and the windmills on the horizon. So being really close to that mine infrastructure, we think is really important when we look forward to confirming discoveries here with the drill, and then ideally evaluating them and the opportunity they present going forward. Now, one of the questions we'll get, or comments you often get, is, well, if the NWT, is it just too remote? And I think the answer to that is no. It kind of depends what you mean by remote and remote from what. Yellowknife is a mining center. It has a history of mining, supporting mining operations. It's a seat of government and governments, Indigenous governments as well. There's Indigenous development corporations there that can provide the services to support exploration and development in the region. And with the winter road access, we're about 350 kilometers or so to the northeast of Yellowknife. And I think just as a good comparable, this slide shows the Yellowknife area at the same scale as James Bay in Quebec, which is sort of the highest profile lithium exploration area in Canada right now. The map is from Patriot Battery Metals and their technical report in June of 23 for the Corvette project. And I think it's just really helpful to show sort of the distances are not that dissimilar, and in many ways we're even closer to Yellowknife and being closer to a mining center to help support development and exploration and all of our activities in the NWT area. So we think it's a good place to be in the NWT, and that their infrastructure is there to support it. Now, with our more greenfields projects, just touching on them really briefly, Bathurst Inlet was acquired with infrastructure in mind. It is remote in Nunavut. The claims were staked along the eastern shore of Bathurst Inlet, but they are close to the port facility that B2 Gold has constructed that's supporting the development of the Back River Gold Mine right now. So infrastructure is being developed in this region. Being on tidewater is really important. And we just think the size of the opportunity here is the key. These are pegmatites that have been mapped by government. We think they're in the right geological setting, and we just need to get on them and confirm whether or not the right mineralization is there to show that they're prospective, that they do they are prospective for spodumene mineralization. And we'll try and come out with a little bit more information on why we think the setting is right in that region. And we are continuing to look at other opportunities as well. So just a couple more slides. One, just again to touch on acquisition cost. I think it's important. We started the year without any lithium projects. We now have 3 that are ready to drill, and we acquired them for about $60,000, and that compares pretty well, we think, to some of the acquisition costs that were paid by other players in the NWT to get an interest in more advanced projects. And the other thing I think just to keep in mind is more the valuation. What is the upside? What's the opportunity here for North Arrow? Lift is an obvious comparable for us in terms of a company that's drilling very aggressively, some significant deposits in the Yellowknife area. And as I've mentioned a few times, we think what we have up at MacKay and at LDG and also at DeStaffany combined is a similar sort of opportunity. So we think that gives an idea of where we could head. And then with Midas and Loyal, as I mentioned, they're ASX listed companies. One of the things that's been sort of a common narrative through this year has just been this valuation gap between TSX or Canadian listed lithium explorers and Australian listed explorers. And this is a good example that we can see of that on the slide. So there certainly is upside. There's for North Arrow as we look forward to seeing all 3 of these projects drilled in 2024, and our goal now is to work out how we're going to see drilling of all 3 of those projects financed. They're all drill ready. They're all permitted for drilling, and I think it's worth just noting again that 1% Li2O or lithia assay that we're seeing is really important when you're looking for spodumene pegmatite deposits. Spodumene is a commodity itself. There is a market for spodumene concentrates, and seeing grades over 1% is really where you want to be. So the fact that with the limited amount of work, we're seeing consistent grab sample and channel sample assay results from all 3 of our projects, from DeStaffany as well as LDG and MacKay, we think it puts North Arrow in a really good spot. There are quite a few companies looking for lithium right now, and with lithium projects, I don't think there's quite a few companies that have 3 projects ready to drill with known spodumene pegmatite drill targets on those properties. But North Arrow does. So I just think if you're interested in lithium companies and lithium stories that have upside that maybe haven't been drilled yet, then North Arrow should really be on your watch list. So thanks very much for listening to this, and feel free to reach out and stay in touch with myself or Nick Thomas going forward, and we'll keep you informed of our plans for 2024 next year.